Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. I just want to talk briefly about the heat wave that's happening. Now, right now in Alaska, and basically interior Alaska over to the Yukon territories, we are seeing this extremely strong high pressure system that has basically set up shop. Temperatures have been very, very high, tying records, setting new record high temperatures. And there's a hint that temperatures may start decreasing towards the end of this week, but for now temperatures remain very, very high. This is not just in Alaska / Yukon territory, however. We're basically seeing this across the circumpolar north. We're seeing, for example, in places above the Arctic Circle, in Sweden, northern Sweden has seen temperatures as high as 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which is typically nowhere near as hot. In fact, the definition of an Arctic region is the mean summer temperature being 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's mean, so you get a little below, a little bit above. A typically nice day here in summer Fairbanks, Alaska would be in the 60s and maybe mid to perhaps low to mid 70s, but we're pushing 90 degrees here. Now, I will state right away that the record high temperature ever recorded in Alaska is 100 degrees. That was in the village of Fort Yukon, which is located about 7 miles north of the Yukon River, where the Yukon River reaches its most northern point before turning southwest to eventually empty into the Bering Sea. So we're seeing some very, very hot temperatures across the circumpolar north. There's some extrapolation based on data that Siberia might have gotten up to 90 degrees as well, which is 40 degrees above normal, right? Going with the average of 50 degrees or so. The problem with this is when it's so hot, it dries the ground out. And it makes it very dry and makes it very prone to fires. And that is where the concern is. So you can set up these forest fires, and the forest fires, as they burn, they're going to do what? They're burning through the vegetative matter. CO2 gets released, adding more CO2 to the atmosphere. Unlike trees at, say, mid-latitudes, temperate latitude, trees in the far north grow extremely slowly. If you look at black spruce are these kind of sticky little things that basically part of what's called a taiga ecosystem, and the soil that they grow in is permafrost. It's extremely acidic soil. It may take a tree a century to grow a foot or two. That's how harsh the conditions are. So if they burn down, it's going to be a long time before that grows back. And then what happens is now you have this vegetative matter on the ground floor that will also start to release methane, CO2. Same thing with peat bogs. Peat bogs, they will dry out, they're carbon rich, and that carbon that's stored there starts getting released into the atmosphere. Along with, whether in the form of CO2 or methane, it gets released. And this all adds to the positive feedback loop you've heard me discuss with you guys before. And positive in the sense that it exacerbates the situation. Now, another problem is when you have these higher temperatures is that you can increase the rate of evaporation. You might even increase the rate of transpiration, which is water loss from the leaves of trees. And of course, this puts more water vapor into the atmosphere, and water vapor acts like a greenhouse gas. It traps the heat. Water vapor, humidity, right? So you have that added concern. Now, when you have more water vapor in the atmosphere, water has a high specific heat capacity, meaning it takes longer to warm up, but it takes longer to cool down. Which is why, if you live near the coast, it doesn't get as cold in the evening and nighttime when the sun sets, because of the water vapor, the high levels of water vapor you have in the air. If you live out in the middle of New Mexico, high plains, interior Alaska, it's going to cool down a lot at night because there's low humidity in the air. So, almost the entire northern hemisphere has been hotter than normal right now. Let's give you some numbers here. Denver hit an all-time high of 105 in June. This is around the same time that Oman reported the highest nighttime low temperature ever recorded in the world, 109 degrees. This was when the sun is on the other side from them. This is nighttime, and it only got down to 109. The highest overnight low temperature. Austin, Texas had a high of 105, maybe hitting 108. In Austin, the fire department, listen to this, responded to a blaze caused by the spontaneous combustion of tortilla chips. That is a new one for me. There was a heat wave in Japan that put 10,000 people in the hospital with at least 30 fatalities. Now, of course, we're always careful to not just take a single event and say, okay, there's your pattern. Weather is different from climate. Weather is what's happening when you look out your window right now. Climate is the long-term average. So we have to be careful about that. But after a while, you do start seeing continued reports like such, and then a pattern does emerge. Hurricanes are getting stronger and stronger, right? We had Sandy, we had the storm that hit Houston, Texas. Irma, I think, was another one that was pummeling in the Caribbean as well. We had basically back-to-back-to-back hurricanes, all hitting at least Category 3 or 4. In fact, the sustained winds, I'm blanking on the name of the hurricane that devastated Texas there, but it had sustained winds of over 184. It's basically talk about creating a Category 6 hurricane. These hurricanes are getting stronger because of the heating up the water, and we have all that energy. It's just, driving these storms. And remember, it takes a lot more to heat up water than it does the air. But when you heat up the water, you increase the rate of evaporation. So, I told you earlier about the stunt that Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma pulled in the Senate floor when he brought a snowball onto the Senate floor and said, "Where's the global warming?" Well, this was in February. Tends to be cold that time of year in most latitudes. And he then tried to use that as a way to deny climate change. It was a stunt, it was stupid, and the guy obviously doesn't understand the fact that increased moisture in the air will lead to increased precipitation. It comes down to snow because the northern hemisphere happens to be tilted away from the sun at that time of year. But and we just had Scott Pruitt, the EPA head, and he was forced to resign. Well, Inhofe was a mentor to Scott Pruitt. I don't think I need to say any more about that, where that's going. But this is a good one here. You have, I said, I usually try to avoid politics, but there are times I really can't help it because it is people like these who are setting policy, and if they don't have an understanding of science, then we're all in trouble. There's this gentleman named Scott Wagner who is a Republican, and he's running for governor of Pennsylvania. And he basically came up with this gem. Yeah, humans are causing climate change. This is what he said. We have more people. Humans have warm bodies, so heat is coming off. What? Okay. Now, an average person hanging around, just, lounging about, can generate as much heat as, say, a 100-watt bulb or so. Okay. But you know what? Where do we get that energy from in the first place? We ultimately got it from the sun. Sun came down, plants photosynthesized, we grew the food, and so on and so forth. So it's just, if we look at net energy, other than energy loss from going from trophic level, it's about the same. So it's not that we are adding heat energy into the atmosphere. It's either coming in from the sun or coming off of our bodies. Basically the same source ultimately, it's the sun. It's not like digging up fossil fuels, the oil, the gas, the coal, what have you, that's been sequestered, and now we're adding that heat energy into the atmosphere, adding that CO2 component. It's been sequestered for hundreds of millions of years. So basically, in essence, what I'm trying to say is that it's just another way of moving energy, for folks who kind of think in those terms, moving calories around. Then he came up with even a better one. Every year, Earth moves closer to the sun. Seems to be implying that we're spiraling into the sun. No, we're not. The rotation of the Earth. Well, first of all, rotation refers to spinning on an axis. Traveling around the sun is called revolving. You complete a revolution. So he doesn't even get that right. We're moving closer to the sun. Well, you know what? There's another thing called the orbit of the Earth. Earth orbits the sun in an ellipse, not a circle. So therefore we have periods, we have what's called aphelion, which is our furthest approach from the sun. Which, by the way, aphelion in the northern hemisphere, well actually for the planet, but here in the northern hemisphere, is in July, in the middle of the summertime. So we're further from the sun in the summertime, up here in the northern hemisphere. It's the tilt of the axis. The axis is tilted towards the planet. Towards the sun. So we're getting a little more direct heat energy. Then there's perihelion, which is when Earth is closest to the sun. And then in between, you're going to, go between closest and furthest. So that's just said, I haven't been in a science class in a long time. You think? And these are, okay, politicians need not necessarily have to be scientific experts, but they need to be scientifically literate. This is just scientific illiteracy, and it's really inexcusable. So, for Mr. Wagner, there's the thing called change in seasons because of Earth's revolution around the sun and the tilt of its axis. So, his campaign manager tried to damage control. His comments were meant to illustrate that there are a lot of theories about what causes global warming. Scott is running for governor not to be a scientist, so he will leave it up to scientists to figure out what the cause of global warming is. Hey, guess what? We figured it out already. It's just the politicians won't listen to the scientists. They won't listen to us. They won't take our advice and our recommendations. If they did, we'd be a good long ways away along the way of solving things. So a little disingenuous comment there, in my opinion, from the campaign manager. But as I said, my point goes down to is that you can't have people running for political office, leadership, whatever, administrative positions, dealing with scientific issues, and being clueless on basic scientific concepts and principles. It's just not right. And it really should be a disqualifier for office, in my opinion. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with this heat wave and so on, and also to think about what this means. The end result being that we could be dumping a lot more CO2 and methane into the atmosphere, further exacerbating the situation. And also to kind of call out politicians for basically not doing their homework and coming up with really silly statements. So, another thing I saw the other day was that for the last 200 months, so this is going back into like 1998, 1999 territory. For the last 200 months, the average temperature planet-wide has been showing a steady increase. And over the span of the 200 months, basically most of those months, if not all of them, are showing higher than average temperatures. Now that is definitely a trend. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk soon. Hey folks, just a reminder to please subscribe and click the bell so you know when I drop a video. And please share my work with others. Please tell them of my channel. And I hope you'll become a patron at Patreon. I place videos on there from time to time exclusively for my patrons there. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support and continued support. Details in the box below. Thanks.